Today we are painting the Fomoroid Crusher. Hey everyone. I'd like to start this video with just a little pretext. I'm still new at making these. So please be patient. Hopefully I'll improve with my camera work and narration as this goes on. So it's kind of a learning process. I've been painting a little bit longer than I've been fiddling around with this stuff. So yeah, hopefully you'll still learn something. I've got my model all pieced out here. I'm starting out with Eshin Gray. You can see I've got a zenithal highlight going, which is essentially just I paint my model completely black and then I spray white down from the top. You can do this with a rattle can. I use an airbrush just because as my black primer is getting low, I can pour my white primer in there and it kind of gets this nice gradient as the white and black mix. So as you're spraying from above, you get a nice transition from black to white, and that takes care of your shadows. On most of my models I like using really thin layers of paint for a couple of reasons. You get really nice smooth coats. Your color adjustment as you're adding it on there isn't as drastic, so you won't pop something on and be like, oh geez, it's out of control. But and it also helps pick up some of those highlights that you do on the first stage of priming. So here I'm just touching up the skin areas. I'm just putting these first base layers down. This guy is a really cool model. He's a Fomoroid crusher, which I'm not really sure what that means, but essentially it looks like he's been chained down someplace and he's broken free. On his ability card, he actually has an ability where it's essentially if you're near terrain you can tear hunks off of it and chunk it at your opponent, which is pretty cool. And you can see he's dragging by a chain some old rubble that I guess he was tied to at one point. He kind of looks too on the box art like he's slowly transforming from a human into a stone. So if you'll notice, I kind of stopped putting gray on the pec area, and I'm pretty much only hitting his pecs and shoulders. I'll hit his face and his other arm and then this hand here, but pretty much from where his belly starts down is all going to be skin tone. So I'm going to finish this up and then I'll get back to you with the next color. Okay, moving on to the arm. Still using that Eshin Gray here. And if you'll notice how the arm is oriented, when you got stuff pieced out and you're doing that zenithal highlighting, you have to make sure that you're doing it with the pieces oriented in the right direction, not just laying flat. And I know this because I did this wrong at first. So I went back through and cleaned it up. Any problems that you have on here are always easy to clean up. Just start back at square one, and that's why it's nice too to have this stuff pieced out, because it gives you a little more control. And you'll only, if you do mess up, you'll only mess up small parts at a time. Next up is Wraithbone. This is just a cool ivory neutral color. It's the base that they recommend you use with contrast paints, which is what I'm going to use for starting on this skin tone. I really like the contrast skin tones because even if they're not exact, once you start adding your other layers on there, they give you a really good base and sort of a, maybe not a profile, but a blueprint for how you're going to add your next layers on there. So I'm going to get this layer of Wraithbone down. Okay, so I'm here on the side where his skin's going to start transitioning up into the gray part of his body, which I assume is turned into stone. And he's just got some gray skin skin problem. I don't know, I may need to see a dermatologist, but essentially what I'm doing, I'm just working that wraith bone up and then going back to my gray point and just working it down. And it's really thin here, but it's essentially how I'm going to get that blending in. So I've got some wraith bone there, and you'll see me, I'm just kind of dragging it up slowly into this gray and then back down just a hair. So you're essentially just mixing the paint on the model itself instead of on a palette. I don't really call this wet blending, but it's really just a fancy term for smearing paint around together. So just go back and forth with your dark down and then your light up until you get a decent transition. And the thinner your paint, the better, because these are just going to be nice little thin layers, and when it's wetter like that, it's easier to blend and won't dry out as fast. Next paint to throw on the pile that we're going to build is Xandri dust. Here we are going to hit, I believe, all of the leather pieces. So you can see his little loincloth there, and he's got these belts going around his body. And then they continue around the back, and I think he's got another little slap of leather to cover his booty on the backside. So we're going to start hitting those up with just a nice thin coat of Xandri dust. You may have to take a couple of coats to cover it up, but just put it on until it's looking smooth. We're going to hit this with some contrast as well in a minute. This is a really good process for leather that I like a lot. So okay, here we've got most of the leather covered with Xandri dust. You can see I've got his little arm leather piece there. Don't forget your detached parts, because I did this a couple of times, I think with his face as well. I forgot to start on it, so I went back and just covered it up. It's real easy, it's just gray essentially. So here I'm using corn red on the cloth parts. You can see he's got some on his arm sticking out from underneath the bandages, his pants. It's essentially, I think, just his underoos, or maybe a old piece of clothing that broke off at some point or another. But we're gonna base those, and then I think that's it for that one. Okay, we'll get back to you here shortly. Next up is Ushabti Bone. Here we're going to hit all the bandages. You can see I've got the red there. I didn't record a lot of that painting, I guess. Like I said, I'm still new to this and trying to figure it out, so thank you for being patient with me. If you see any major things I'm doing wrong, or if there's anything you'd like to see or have me do different, or even recommendations on how to improve, feel free to put it in the comments below. I am really trying to get into this and do it the right way, so any help I can get, I will take. Okay, so we're starting on the bandages here. You can see with the Ushabti Bone. And a lot of these base colors are just real plain. We're putting it on simple, but we'll put the lipstick on this pig a little bit later. So I'm going to go through here and fix these bandages up. Here we are with the bandages all done, and we're hopping into the metallics. And we're going to use Abaddon, is how I say it. I think it says it. Abaddon? I don't know which is right, and I refuse to look and find out which way is right. Yeah, that's probably because I'm wrong. But for the metallics, we're just going to base coat everything in this black. So nice thin layers again. You want your metals looking nice and smooth. And on this model, the metal pieces have some really cool kind of dented, rippled effect on the metal, like it's pitted and aged. So this fella had been chained up for a while before his deformation started to happen. So we're going to paint all of these black. He's got his shackles, his chain, his shoulder pad, which I've also got detached at the moment, and then a few little pieces around his body. With most of the base colors down now, we're gonna start prettying this up a little bit. We've got Gore Grunta Fur, and this is my new favorite color for leathers. For the amount of work that you put in, the output is fantastic. So we're gonna hit all those areas that we initially hit with Xandri dust. So this darker leather around his chest and his loincloth and all that. And hopefully you can see as I put this on, you just have to kind of get in there, man. Slap that stuff on there. Just don't let it pull up in places where it doesn't make sense, like on top of ridges. But yeah, go crazy. Let it fill up those gaps there and those wrinkles. It looks really good once it's dry. So I'm gonna finish this up, and then we'll start on the next step. Before we move on to the next step, I just wanted to show you here. It's not dry yet, but for leather it gets this nice kind of cool, I'm not sure if you'd call it patina, but like sort of this rippled wavy effect. I think this is natural for contrast paints, which normally doesn't look good on smooth surfaces, but leather generally has a grain to it anyway, so I think it's just kind of a cool little added effect there. Okay, here I am with some Phoenician purple. I'm gonna hit up this dude's lips here, and I'll come back and I'll change this up a little bit later on. I think I kind of blended that back into gray, but that's okay. Purple blends into gray really nicely. So yeah, I'm just gonna hit this and start on the next part. With those sexy purple lips done, we are now moving on to that bear gut. So pop out that Gilliman flesh, and we're gonna slap some on any of the skin areas that we've got covered in Wraithbone. We're pretty much gonna hit. I think I did go ahead and cover the skulls in Wraithbone. I think we're gonna hit that with some skeleton horror later, but right now just focus on any of the skin areas. I do drag it up onto that gray there. We're gonna be popping on layers later, so it's really not that big of a deal. Just hit those skin areas. Not like a crazy gloppy coat, and just make sure it's not settling in any weird spots. If it does, just dry your brush off and then just kind of gently touch it in the areas where it's pulling it up, and it'll kind of capillary action that stuff off of where you don't want it to be. Sometimes it's just a real nice little gentle touch, and it'll fix it up for you. Okay, well, I'm going to finish hitting these skin areas, and then we'll start on the next part.